Have fun watching Trump fellate Putin in their meeting today in Alaska. No, in Russia. No, in Alaska. No, in Russia. You know, I don't know where it is anymore. I'm too busy still giggling that Caroline Leavitt renamed it from the Trump-Putin-Ukraine summit into Trump's listening exercise. Trump listening to Putin. A listening exercise with Putin. Listening to Putin tell him what to do. No shit. As always, the last line of defense against democracy, besides South Park, this fact. The last line of defense for democracy is these guys are idiots. And this one is simple to see what's going to happen. Trump and Putin will leave this photo op having agreed on something utterly agreeable to Putin, like the ceasefire that Axios reports Trump told European leaders yesterday he really wants. And you know what that would be. Putin will agree to a ceasefire if Ukraine will stop annoying Putin by trying to defend its territory. Then Trump will claim a victory, that he has settled this war. Then Ukraine will reject it, although President Zelensky's real play would be to say this is too naive an idea to even merit a comment. And then Trump will blame Zelensky and say, well, he resolved this war except for the war part, and that Zelensky screwed it up. But he's the great deal maker. And you must love him now. Actually, it may turn out worse than that. The Times of London reporting with this headline, U.S. and Russia propose West Bank-style occupation of Ukraine. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is understood to support the idea, which can be revealed before the president meets Putin. In Alaska. Are we sure about Alaska? Russia and the United States have discussed a model for ending the war in Ukraine that mirrors Israel's occupation of the West Bank. The Times has been told, under this scenario, Russia would have military and economic control of occupied Ukraine under its own governing body, imitating Israel's de facto rule of Palestinian territory seized from Jordan in 1967. The idea was raised weeks ago in discussions between Steve Witkoff and his Russian counterparts, according to a source close to the U.S. National Security Council. I'm sure Witkoff thought this up himself. Witkoff is still playing with his toes. Quote, it'll just be like Israel occupies the West Bank, the source said, with a governor, with an economic situation that goes into Russia, not Ukraine. But it'll still be Ukraine because Ukraine will never give up its sovereignty. But the reality is it'll be occupied territory and the model is Palestine, unquote. Just like Israel and the West Bank, it'll be Ukraine, only the Ukrainians there will be ruled by another country and have their children shot by that country. Best possible model out there, the West Bank. From Bloomberg TV, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told them sanctions are a possibility if Putin doesn't do what Trump wants. Trump will, quote, make it clear to President Putin that all options are on the table. Yes, the options are Trump will pee his pants or Trump will shit his pants. From Politico, Trump said Putin could face very severe consequences if he decides Putin is still not serious about ending the war. Oh, serious consequences this time. You know what that means? That means Trump will no longer give him another 50 days to end the war. He'll only give him 25 more days to end the war. Trump is a laughingstock after a meeting that hasn't happened yet. You want to impress the world, Trump? You want to make up for everything? At the meeting, during the photo op, during the handshake, attack Putin with your manly bare hands. Around the throat. Very severe consequences. What, you won't let him hack the American federal court document computers next time? You won't give him all the data on the sources who helped prosecute Russians? Severe consequences. Threaten him with sanctions on Russian oil while letting him wash Russian crude oil through China and India. Trump. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. Okay, about the new military dictatorship in Washington that Trump has threatened to impose also on Baltimore, Chicago, and New York. Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington described Trump's moves as unsettling and unprecedented, correct? Then she added, the fact that we have more law enforcement presence in neighborhoods, that may be a positive. Bullshit, Mayor. It's a military dictatorship. That is in no way a positive. Madam Mayor, it is a dry run for installing the army. The army Trump believes is his, like Julius Caesar thought the army was his, like Hitler thought the army was his. Installing it in every place in your city, Mayor, and then around the country, mostly to overrule mayors and governors who will not obey him or who are Democrats. It is a military dictatorship tryout. Mayor, if you are going to be foolish enough to feel the way you do, to use the word positive in connection with Donald Trump, the difference between exploiting any value you might perceive and collaborating is shutting the F up. If he is inadvertently helping the city of Washington in some way, great. Don't tell him that. Because he doesn't care whether or not he's helping the city of Washington. He only wants that may be a positive part. Because now, forever, he will say, the mayor said it was a positive. Washington City paper reports Mayor Bowser finally snapped out of her pacifist dream. We don't live in a dirty city, Bowser declared during a Zoom meeting with invited community leaders. We are not 700,000 scumbags and punks, and we don't have neighborhoods that should be bulldozed. Our community needs to jump in. We all need to do what we can in our space, in our lane to protect our city and get to the other side of this guy and make sure we elect a Democratic House, so that we have a backstop to this authoritarian push. Well, that's a little bit more like it. Also, what Trump is doing in Washington is based on an utter lie. Not just an utter lie, but based on the exact opposite of what Trump and the whores working for him said not 4 months ago. It's a lie about what they said, what they themselves pre-contradicted. The lie that crime is increasing in the District of Columbia. Speaking of the District of Columbia, this is a lie and a self-flagellation worthy of Columbia University. Less than 4 months ago, the Trump goon Ed Martin was literally insisting there was a 1/4 drop in violent crime in Washington and demanding we all praise Trump for it. April 28th, quote, thanks to the leadership of President Trump and the efforts of our Make D.C. Safe Again initiative, the district has seen a significant decline in violent crime. We are proving that strong enforcement and smart policies can make our communities safer. It's so safe and we're so good and Trump is so wonderful, we're bringing in the troops. They will lie in any direction. They will contradict themselves in any direction. They will say whatever is necessary this minute, no matter how much it contradicts an hour ago, or how much they will contradict it tomorrow. And if there were any doubts as to what Trump's plans long-term are here, he gave them away yesterday. He might as well have put on the big Kim Jong-un hat that he likes so much. And by the way, the day he comes out wearing a military outfit with one of those big hats, it's over. That is the day when either he goes or any chance at restoring American democracy goes. We are not there yet because he doesn't have a hat. In the interim, though, we have this bullshit.
Your federalization of the police has a 30-day limit unless Congress acts to extend it. Are you talking to Congress about extending it, or do you believe 30 days is sufficient?
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress before Congress very quickly. And again, we think the Democrats will not do anything to stop crime, but we think the Republicans will do it almost unanimously. So we're going to need a crime bill that we're going to be putting in, and it's going to pertain initially to D.C. It's almost, we're going to use it as a very positive example. And we're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days. 30 days that's by the time you do it. We're going to have this in good shape. And don't forget, in the border, everyone said it would take years and you'd have to go back to Congress. I never went to Congress for anything. I just said, close the border. And they closed the border. And that was the end of it. I didn't go back to Congress. We're going to do this very quickly.
The F you can, F-face. Brian Beutler, who I should pay by the quote, I quote him so much, wrote yesterday that in D.C., at least, the Second Amendment should be honored. He means the real Second Amendment, the real intent, the idea that residents of the individual states and territories should be allowed to defend themselves against an armed authoritarian federal government. He's not talking about the gunfight at the DuPont Circle Corral. But he's saying maybe it's time to reduce the hurdles keeping Americans who live in places like D.C., like New York, who would be threatened by Trump, physically threatened by Trump, physically threatened by Trump's ISIS, physically threatened by Trump's brown shirts, physically threatened. Efforts should be made by local constituencies to reduce the restrictions to keep these people who are being physically threatened, the ones he's called traitors. Reduce the restrictions on them getting weapons with which to protect themselves if they so choose. On to Trumpstein, one of the greatest of the Monty Python jokes that usually goes by so fast in the episode you don't even notice it. John Cleese in a BBC truck, Graham Chapman having just done something for the BBC standing next to it, and Graham Chapman says, can you give me a lift? And John Cleese says, can do, but won't. This, from Eva Braun at the press briefing the other day, Trump wants to see credible evidence released. The reporter asked, a judge ruled that the grand jury transcripts in Ghislaine Maxwell's case should not be released. Levitt says, we think that is unfortunate. The president wants to see credible evidence released. As for the appeal process, I would send you to the Department of Justice for that. Well, sure, he wants to see credible evidence released, but of course, he also wants to make sure that such evidence is not released. Just like crime is going up in D.C., except it's 25% down, says his spokesman, who's not around. So you can't go back to him and say, were you lying then, or is Trump lying now, or both? We want to see credible evidence released. Not on this planet. She's a genius. I mean, she is the absolute genius of all geniuses, isn't she? We do not yet have the official Trumpstein files, but CNN has its own version. They wrote in 2019 in an interview, Epstein referred to Trump as his closest friend for 10 years, a claim echoed by three others who knew the men: Maria Farmer, one of Epstein's first victims to speak publicly, Stacey Williams, a former model who dated Epstein, and Jack O'Donnell, a former Trump casino executive, all of whom used the phrase best friend to describe their bond in recent interviews on CNN. A timeline of Trump's interactions with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell reveals a long pattern, CNN reported, of social proximity that stands in sharp contrast to Trump's public attempts to downplay their friendship, end quote. The timeline that CNN then produced, which goes on page after page after page and photograph after photograph after photograph, on and on and on, bulges with flight logs. Trump on Epstein's jet. Epstein on Trump's jet. Trump at Epstein's mansion next door. Epstein at Trump's mansion next door. Trump on Epstein's jet. Epstein on Trump's jet. Trump and his son Eric on Epstein's jet. Trump on Epstein's girlfriend. Now, as to the records of Ghislaine Maxwell's still unexplained move from a federal pen in Florida to basically minimum security in Texas with the right to leave the campus to go to work, reportedly, Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island has written to the director of the Federal Prisons Bureau for the documents. Allison Gill, the Mueller she wrote person, has some of them already from a source. According to a source, she writes, Maxwell's transfer code is 308, lesser security transfer. This transfer code is normally reserved for inmates whose point total has come down, but sex offenders are never transferred to minimum security facilities. Her security point score is 27. This total is comprised of a 20-point custody score and a 7-point base score. Her 20-point custody score, and here is something that's obviously been screenshotted off a computer monitor. Time served, 4, 26 to 75%. Living skills, 2, good. Frequently of discipline report, I guess that is what that abbreviation means, 3, none. Prog participat, 2, good. Progress, I guess, towards not being a pedophile. Type discipline report, 5, none. And family/community, 4, good. She's like family to us. Then she has a 7-point base score, which is the highest severity because of, as is written by Ms. Gill, because of her sex offender status. Oops. So despite her score of 27 resulting in a minimum security level, BOP policy does not allow people with a sex offender public safety factor to serve their sentences in minimum security facilities. Someone has to waive the PSF to make that move, and then there is a screenshot that reads name Maxwell Ghislaine, pub sifty, sex offender. This indicates she is a threat to the public because of her sex offender status, and her management variable of PSF-WAV indicates her sex offender status has been waived in order to facilitate her move to a minimum security facility. So when the question is, will Trump pardon her, that's almost an irrelevancy. As I have been saying here from the day that Trump sent his former personal attorney, the now Deputy Attorney General of the United States, to see her in jail and give her 2 days of immunity. From that point, Trump has already had a deal with Ghislaine Maxwell. He is already figuratively in bed with Ghislaine Maxwell. The witness, the living witness, in the Trumpstein case, and she is allowed to leave, prison. Where's she going? Oh, she's allowed to leave. She'll be back tonight, even though she's sentenced to stay here through 2037. The Stephen Wright joke suddenly occurs to me. He goes to the 24/7 deli, says open 24/7, and he walks up to it, and the sign in the window says, closed. And he raps on the glass, and the guy running the place comes to goes, what? We're closed. And Stephen Wright says, it says you're open 24/7. And the guy running the store says, oh, not in a row. 4 more things. And sorry for the ragged nature of this episode. There are dog health emergencies at the moment that I need to deal with. For anybody else who said, like me in late 2001, are you sure you want to call it the Department of Homeland Security? Homeland? Isn't that a term? Is it a little too, not too Nazi for you? Homeland Security put out this meme, "Which way, American man? Join ice.gov." It's a picture of Uncle Sam, and he's got a signpost that reads Law and Order, and it's from cultural decline is one direction, homeland, invasion, opportunity, service. The key part of this, though, as the immigration expert and lawyer Aaron Reichlin Melnick notes, Trump's people at DHS are referencing here, when they write "Which Way, American Man," they are referencing here "Which Way, Western Man," a book by white supremacist William Gailey Simpson that was published by an American neo-Nazi organization, the Republican Party. Oh, no, sorry. I read that wrong. An American neo-Nazi organization, the National Alliance. In the book, Simpson argued that Hitler was right and Jews must be killed. Which way, Western man? But, of course, ICE, Kristi Noem, Trump, Tom Homan, the rest of these MFers, they didn't say which way, Western man. They're not neo-Nazis. They just said which way, American man. We go from American man to American dildo. That would be Clay Travis. Used to be a sportscaster of some kind. The same con men who were claiming to be defending women athletes from the horrors of transgendered competitors, all 5 or 6 of them nationwide. You remember them? They appeared right before the election and made a big deal about Leah Thomas and all those other transgendered athletes, none of whom they could identify, and the NCAA said they thought there might be one in the state of Michigan. Same guys, Clay Travis. Well, they're back. This is about the recent rash of green sex toys that have been thrown at WNBA games to promote crypto, because actually, when I think crypto, I think of people playing with themselves. Clay Travis, who was one of the people who platformed Whiny Gaines on this scourge of all of these transgendered competitors who made her finish 85th in the Olympic trials. Per Media Matters, I'll just quote them. Travis offered to donate money to the legal defense fund of someone accused of throwing a sex toy at a WNBA game for every copy of his book that was sold. Travis posted several times about the incident. Latest dildo gambling odds are posted. Lots of value on a white dildo after last night's purple dildo. I'll stop using that word here. Over under, WNBA counts at 7 for the season. Feels low. Other posts, he said, quote, "I agree, not funny, classless. The penal code exists for a reason, guys. Penalties are stiff." He's one of the intellectuals of the right-wing fascist sports world. Don't let that look of it on his face like, as Bill Hicks once said, like a dog to whom you have just shown a card trick. Don't let that fool you. Clay Travis is a genius. I understand he can actually write his own name now. Which is a worse penalty for the WNBA green thrower? Get banned from attending WNBA games for a year, or you're forced to attend an entire season of games? Now remember, this is the same guy saying that the women in sports needed to be defended. Travis also posted, according to Media Matters, an edited picture of what appears to be President Donald Trump throwing from the White House roof onto a WNBA court. Well, we know he didn't put a WNBA court in the White House. He just put in the cheapest-looking patio from the Hot Sheet Hotel outside the White House. Are we sure, by the way, that that's that's an edited picture of Trump throwing something off the roof? Particularly something like that? On the other hand, to be fair, who would know better about how to discuss dildo usage with other men than Clay Travis? Unrelated to this, the Sydney Sweeney scandal. I actually tweeted, and I meant it sincerely, who the F is Sydney Sweeney? I assumed, because you don't see a lot of guys named Sydney anymore, that this was a woman and some influencer. It turns out she's an actress who did a jeans commercial. Somebody thought the actress was in a jeans commercial that was misogynistic. Wow, a jeans commercial that's misogynistic? Oh, what is the world coming to? The right decided that somebody who wrote this or said this, one person apparently, spoke for all liberals for all time, and none of you ever could possibly have your own opinions or not care or anything else. And then Sean Hannity went to prove this with a poll, with an Economist YouGov poll. Do you think the Sydney Sweeney ad is more clever, offensive, neither, or not sure? 39% said it was clever. 40% said it was neither. 8% said they were not sure. And 12% said it was offensive. So 87% of America says it's not offensive. 48% say they don't give a crap. Even for a Sean Hannity speech impediment rage factory bullshit story, this is a bullshit story. Trump has named the host of the next Kennedy Center Honors Show. It's himself. And I thought it was going to be Sydney Sweeney. So Trump is going to host it himself. So the first 3 hours will be him bitching about how he really won the 1876 election and how he's 185 pounds. The camera just makes him look bigger, and he's only 44 years old. If we're going by 24-month years. He's also named the honorees. KISS. Kennedy Center honors KISS. KISS? Gene Simmons hates Trump. Gene Simmons, a conservative, hates Trump. Does he know? Tomorrow's story will be Kennedy Center does not honor KISS. George Strait. I'm sorry. George Strait sucks. Sylvester Stallone. I'm sorry. Rocky. It's a terrible movie. And Sylvester Stallone sucks. Michael Crawford. Star of Phantom of the Opera and well, he was like the 8th leading man in the Hello, Dolly movie. He's somewhere down well below Walter Matthau on the list of credits in the Hello, Dolly. Honestly, Trump thinks he chose Cindy Crawford, right? He doesn't. Roderick Crawford? Yeah, pick that Crawford. And finally, Gloria Gaynor. Now, as I have aged, it turned out I like disco as much as anybody else from the 70s. I now find that 2 out of every 500 disco records are palatable. For the longest time, it was 1, and during that time, it was none. I like to think I've mellowed. And her song, I Will Survive, is iconic. I can go a decade without hearing it, but it's iconic. It's a great song. Another great song is Na 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 Hey Hey Goodbye by Steam. Of course, Nancy Faust made that a big hit. Gloria Gaynor had a number 1 hit. One number 1 hit for 3 weeks, not consecutive. I'd like to point out that also on the all-time list of number 1 hits, Disco Duck by Rick Dees, but that was only for a week. So Rick would not be honored. Gloria Gaynor. I Will Survive was on the first Rolling Stones list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. It came in at number 492. Then they redid this, and something happened. There was a recount. Some votes were thrown out. I don't know. It's now 251st. I'm not saying that if something I had sung, and I have sung here badly, if something I had sung here was suddenly named the 251st greatest song of all time, I'm not saying I would say, you want to take that off the list? But 251st, I'm not getting a jacket made up with that on the back. I sang the 251st greatest song of all time. And then a little in the bottom there, 10 spots behind the Humpty Dance. She's got to be proud. Kennedy Center honors. They'll never hear from any of these people anyway because Trump has named himself the host of the Kennedy Center honors. So it will be the Kennedy Center, or whatever he's calling it, the Ken Trumpety Center honors Trump. And he'll just talk about himself. Possibly for more than one day. Lastly, if that were not comic relief enough for you, just when you think Anna Paulina Luna or Nancy Mace or Derek Van Orden or Tulsi Gabbard or Senator Roger 911 Marshall could challenge Marjorie Stupid Green for dumbest Republican of all time, no, they can't.
And so it's really interesting to see these people just use basically their platforms as a bully puppet and just go straight to name calling and lying.
Bully puppet. Bully puppet. It's pulpit, Marge. Yeah, P-U-L. But, for all intensive purposes, we have to nip this in the butt, extract revenge, literally and irregardless, and give the honor that is due here.
The Nobel Peace Prize.
But this begs the question, is Marjorie Barney Rubble Green no longer just the stupidest Republican, but the stupidest human alive? Also of interest here, Andrew Cuomo has done one of these, only it was with a Muhammad Ali quote. The Muhammad Ali quote. And Andrew Cuomo has been defeated by a Muhammad Ali quote as well as by Mamdani. That's next. This is Countdown. I got that right.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead on this all-new edition of Countdown, I am late to the anniversary by more than 1 week, in fact. But I can never forget this anniversary at this time of year, seared into my memory. 46 years and 12 days ago. A month into my career, 7 solo shifts into my career, and the star catcher and captain of the New York Yankees baseball team is killed in a plane crash, his plane, 1 minute before I was going on to do a sportscast carried by 1,000 radio stations on our network. Next in Things I Promise Not to Tell. First, believe it or not, the fun stuff. There are still more new idiots to talk about. The roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. The bronze, worse. After Trump's step towards military dictatorship in D.C., no, he's not just trying to throw raw meat to the base. He's trying to take over the dictatorship and start it now. After that, everything that is wrong in the media and wrong in this country and wrong in the leopards eating faces party, all those people who said, I didn't know the leopards were going to eat my face, and in its rival, the I didn't know we were frogs being boiled alive party. All that is wrong in all of these things summed up in 18 words on CNN. Literally, the network can go off the air now. It has fulfilled its final purpose to summarize this nightmare in less than 20 words. I guess the contest is 25 words or less. She beat it by 7, 18 words. It was, of course, on CNN, and it was, of course, by Casey Hunt, who's one of the hosts there. I would say newscaster, but that's not what she does. This is another person, another celebrity on CNN who has decided that the events of the world do not apply to her. That she lives in some other world over there across town. That the things that happen don't apply to her and never will touch her, and she'll never have a problem with them. And she was on the Trump campaign in 2016, and like everybody else who covered that, now that they're not facing that every day, they seem some merit in this, like the mayor of Washington saying, well, maybe it's not going to be a help. You're going to be in a prison camp. If not now, then later. Christ, read your history book. You only have to go to about page 15. In any event, this is what happened. Representative Jamie Raskin was on Casey Hunt's show, Treasure Hunt or whatever it's called, and talked about the fact that crime is significantly down. It's the second lowest murder rate in 60 years in Washington. Second lowest overall crime rate in 30 years in Washington. Dropping by 25%. Trump boasted that it was down by Trump's lackey Ed Martin boasted, and Trump boasted that crime is down by a quarter since he took office. It's already down, and yet he's doing this. And what does Casey Hunt ask Jamie Raskin? We know that statistics show crime is down in D.C., but does it feel like crime is down? What's the vibe? Because we're going to turn this country into a dictatorship because Casey Hunt has a bad vibe. Because she and Benny Johnson, of course, has been murdered several times when he lived in Washington, and then he came back to life. And they burned down his house, and they had murders outside his house, and murders in his basement, and they lit an entire city block on fire, and the nuclear weapons were used on his block. You heard him. And Casey Hunt is asking, does it feel like crime is down? I don't know. Does it feel to you like you're a functioning idiot? Does it feel like crime is down? That's why we are going to hell in a handbasket, because somebody would say something like that. I would argue that that is a dumber thing said on CNN than the day a decade ago after the Malaysian airliner disappeared and Don Lemon asked if there could be a small enough black hole in the universe to have swallowed up just the one aircraft, that it might have just gone into a black hole. That was pretty dumb. That really was an indicator that somebody had never considered anything about black holes, physics, what would happen if there were a black hole near the Earth, that one necessarily big enough to swallow a plane would swallow the entirety of Earth and his own house. No. I would argue this is dumber. This is somebody in the news whose newscast is not necessarily so influential that the CNN executives would try to kill it off or turn them into a Trump supporter the way they did with Jake Tapper. I mean, Chris Licht did not even bother trying to turn Casey Hunt into anything other than what she is. Somebody would ask, we know that statistics show crime is down in D.C., but does it feel like crime is down? We can put that on the country's epitaph. Put that right on the stone. United States of America, it was a good idea, 1776, 2025. But does it feel like crime is down? Also, does this pot that we're in feel warmer than it does? Or what about those leopards eating those faces? Does it feel like they're eating those faces? Runner-up, worser, Andrew Cuomo. Can't imagine you missed this, but if you did, somehow he put this out on Twitter about his supposed fight against Zoran Mamdani for mayor of New York, the one he already lost and has decided for some reason to go out and lose again 2 in 1 year. He decided to compliment his fighting spirit, his return from, being one of the many New York governors who had to resign, this time both over a sex scandal and over a dead people scandal. Good governor. Yeah, be mayor now. Yeah, except he's losing by more than he was losing in the primary. In any event, I haven't gotten around to what he wrote. He wrote, "Fly like a butterfly, sting like a bee." Literally the most famous quote given by worldwide the most famous person in the 1970s, certainly, and still into the 80s and 90s and into this decade, the beginning of this decade anyway, when he died in 2016, I want to say. Literally his most famous quote. You Google Ali quote, and the one you get is, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That's why it's famous. It's clever. It doesn't have the same word in it twice in a span of 1, 2, 3, 4 words. Fly like a butterfly. Fly like a flying butterfly would be better. Fly butterly like a flying butterfly. Andrew, did you read it aloud before you hit send? Did you ask anybody else to do it? Or is there, even worse, somebody you hired to do social media for you who wrote that? This is Andrew Cuomo's best chance to become mayor of New York. Cancel all the ads. Cancel all of his idiotic ads. Stop all social media. In fact, leave the country until Election Day. I guarantee you, if you do that, you will go up in the polls. I'm not saying you'll come close to Mamdani, but you will go up in the polls. The only thing I can figure about this whole campaign is that it's either some sort of punked prank, and they're filming it all to make it into a reality series called Andrew Cuomo Deliberately Loses the Election, or the campaign is just one giant coded message from Cuomo to Trump that, yes, Cuomo will serve as Trump's military governor of the New York zone when Trump puts every blue city under martial law after Casey Hunt is done asking, but does it feel safe? Cuomo in New York, Jeanine Pirro in wine country, and, of course, Casey Hunt in Washington. Fly like a butterfly. Unless he was trying, and we've gotten this all wrong, he was trying not for Muhammad Ali, but for the Steve Miller Band. Fly like an eagle. Sting like, I'm free. Float like a butterfly. Stink from the head like a fish. And still there's something worse. The winner, the worst, Jeff Bezos. I'm just going to read this post from OK magazine. OK. Well, it's OK, letter O, letter K, exclamation point. How do you pronounce that? OK. Quote, Jeff Bezos is about to make his wife, Lauren Sanchez, a star. Insiders recently revealed Bezos' plans to launch his wife into the sun? No. Launch his wife into a prominent acting role in the James Bond reboot. Claiming the billionaire is fixed on seeing her in the film. I think the word you were going for there is fixated. Quote, he's obsessed, a Hollywood insider dished to a news outlet. This isn't just fantasy casting. Jeff wants her on screen, period. I guess on the theory that if he has to suffer her, we all have to suffer her. Okay. So Bezos bought the Bond franchise. A couple months ago, he asked people online who the next Bond girl should be. And now this would explain why he did that. Because Lauren Sanchez would be the next Bond girl. A few problems. First, she can't move her lips anymore. I mean, when she could move her lips, when I worked with her, she couldn't move her lips. The famous tape. I don't know what became of it, and once again, I copied so many things in so many different jobs, I don't have this. The famous Fox Sports News quote, her on camera reading a story about the baseball pitcher. Quote, Roger Clemens' era is the second lowest in his ERA. And that was done, to be fair, she was a little busy at the time. She was carrying the child of an NFL player while dating an NBA player. This was just before she left Fox and went to the local independent station in LA, KCOP, and did the news and did that sweep series I've told you about before, How to Meet a Baller, which I thought was the most appalling thing I'd ever seen in local television news until I realized that for the first time, here was a sweep series, a how-to sweep series that was actually being conducted by an expert. I mean, the two of them now, when they are in public, they look like Waylon Jennings and Madam. No, Waylon Flowers and Madam. Waylon Jennings was the musical artist, the country western star. Waylon Flowers was his name. I may have called him Waylon Jennings at some point. Look up Waylon Flowers and Madam and just, Google image or something. Or don't, maybe just go to Amazon and buy Waylon Flowers and Madam. You'll see what I'm talking about. I get it, Jeff. You're worth all the money in the world. Of course you get a trophy wife. Conversely, you're Lauren Sanchez. Your goal is to find the richest man you can. I don't think that's a sexist observation. I literally met her in 1998. It is an analysis of her life to that point, let alone since then. I'm not objecting. I'm not judging people. Relationships, I have a whole pile of relationships that people go, what? You did what? Seriously? What were you thinking? And of course the correct answer is nothing. I was thinking nothing, obviously. Sorry. I mean, that's my attitude towards it. I'm just as guilty as the rest of them. However, I'm not objecting, but you are doing it in public, and if this is correct, you are going into a James Bond movie with no professional acting experience. You're going to get some attention. But the real problem begins when Daddy Warbucks over here decides Lauren is a James Bond girl. At least, OK magazine says that is what he has decided. Well, let me read that money quote again. OK says, Bezos, quote, plans to launch his wife into a prominent acting role in the James Bond reboot. Doesn't say which one. Doesn't say Bond girl. We're just assuming what that role is. Bond girl. It could be something else. Jeff Bezos with Lauren Sanchez as Odd Job. Or with Lauren Sanchez as Richard Kiel as Jaws. Today's other worst person in the world!
Nobel Peace Prize.
And now to our number one story on the countdown and things I promised not to tell, and back to my favorite topic, me. And I will take you back a little ways back to August 2nd, 1979. 1 month earlier to that day, July 2nd, 1979, I had been in the stands in my family's seats back of first base at Yankee Stadium in New York. I was a 20-year-old fan, unemployed, applauding Thurman Munson's RBI double and Lou Pinella's 2-for-4 day and Roy White's appearance, since he was my mother's favorite New York Yankee player. Now, August 2nd, I was finishing the first month of my professional broadcasting career. It was either my 7th or 8th solo shift as the nighttime sportscaster at UPI's radio network. For my first sportscast of that night, I had long since finished my script. Tom Watson was leading in round 1 of the PGA Championship, golf that is, in Michigan. The lawyer who owned the Washington team of the NFL, Edward Bennett Williams, had just bought the Baltimore Orioles. There was a Montreal Expos Chicago Cubs matinee in Montreal with 3 rain delays, and they were supposed to have had a roof on that stadium. It was 5:43 p.m. Eastern, and I was making the short walk from the little sports cubby hole where I prepared the broadcast to the little main on-air studio, and just walking past this bank of thermal printers, which each made this same sluggish, muted, honking sound like that, as they slowly printed stories on what wasn't really paper. There was the main UPI wire, there was the UPI Sports Wire, the UPI Business Wire, the UPI International Wire, the UPI Radio Wire, several internal message wires, there was the UPI Tartar Wire, but it was the message wires that suddenly started to make noise. Those were the ones via which the UPI bureaus around the world could communicate more or less instantly with headquarters in New York. The equivalent of, I guess, texts or intra-office top lines in computers. Faster than an email, even today. New York, the New York Bureau, was abbreviated NX. Not sure why, but there it was. New York was NX. As I got within a foot of these machines, one of them made a noise I had never heard before. A series of 10 loud bells. I moved over to see what the hell that could mean. The news editor, Frank Rayfield, came over to check as well. Obviously, he hadn't heard this a lot in his career, and his was longer than mine. We saw the words simultaneously, and we gasped simultaneously. Cleveland Bureau to NX. Thurman Munson, catcher, captain, New York Yankees, dead, piloting private plane, Canton, Akron Airport, 30. As soon as the words finished printing, Cleveland sent it again. The bells went off again. I could now see from one of the ubiquitous clocks in the room. I now had about a minute until my sportscast started, whether or not I was in the studio. The editor pointed this out to me as well. You'll have to ad-lib the sportscast, then come out here and do a voicer. Just talk about his career. Keep repeating that this is a bulletin, that he's dead, that he was piloting a private plane. You know anything about him and planes? And I remember saying aloud, oh, God, yes, I do. And he said, well, use whatever you think fits. If anything else comes in, I'll bring it in to you, and I'll try to get somebody at the airport for some sound. I don't remember what I said on the air at 5:45 Eastern Time. Or anything else that night. Nor in the special report, the voicer that the editor, Frank, had just had me record as soon as I finished that live sportscast. It was all recorded, and I never wanted to hear a word of it because I knew my youth was over right then. Thurman Munson had joined the New York Yankees when I was 10 years old. Literally half my life ago on that date. He was the first good rookie I ever saw added to my team. The Yankees stunk when I was a kid. My family was convinced he looked like my mother's cousin, Billy. I met him a couple of times. I'd photographed him once when I was a photographer, interviewed him once. He was gruff. He was forbidding, but I had never had a problem with him. If you were polite and you had picked the right moment to do it, there wasn't a problem. What I knew about him and his plane, Frank Raphael's question to me, I spoke of as generically as possible because in my mind I flashed back to lunch in the press room at the old Yankee Stadium 4 months earlier when I was still in college, sitting there with my friend Rick Cerrone, an editor and writer, not Rick Cerrone, who would later be the Yankees catcher, replacing Thurman Munson of all people. Munson, editor Rick Cerrone said, almost surreptitiously, leaning in toward me over the little table in the press room, is flying his own plane back home to Ohio on every day off. And the Yankees are terrified. He's just not as good a pilot as he thinks he is. Honest to God, one of the executives is trying to get Steinbrenner to trade him to Cleveland just so he'll get out of the plane. They all think he might wind up killing himself. I don't even know how many special reports I did in addition to a new sportscast every hour that night. Later, a friend of mine from college who did not even know I had gotten this job as a sportscaster told me he was driving in Buffalo, listening to the news on the radio at about 5:45 that night, August 2nd. He heard them say Munson had been killed. With more, here's Keith Olbermann in New York. And he said he almost drove off the road, and he wasn't sure if it was because Munson was dead or because the guy had said, here's Keith Olbermann in New York. And I do know my boss, Sam Rosen, who did the morning shift and would have only gotten home from it at around noon or 1 or 2 p.m. that day, so only maybe 4 hours earlier, he came back into the office that night to supervise things and to put together a long memorial special to feed to the 1,000 stations that used our stuff. Boy, was I glad to see him. Until, that is, he handed me a piece of paper. These are the home phone numbers for Lou Piniella and Roy White, Yankees outfielders. Roy White, Lou Piniella. Call them, Sam said. Try to do interviews. Be gentle. Just see if you can get one cut from them. Like Munson, they had played in that game exactly 1 month before my last as a fan before I started to work for UPI. Lou Piniella answered his own phone, and somehow I asked him if he would talk to me for 2 minutes, and he did, and almost immediately he burst into tears. And this was such raw, immediate, brutal pain evident in his voice. I did the only thing I could think of. I said, listen, you shouldn't have to do this all night. I'll make copies of this interview. I'll give it to the other radio networks so they will leave you alone. Only after that did I think to ask my boss if I could do that, and mercifully, Sam said it was. When I called Roy White, and Roy White was literally on the Yankees the day I had become a baseball fan at the age of 7, Roy White begged me to tell him that there had been some sort of mistake, that Thurman Munson was not dead. And both he and Lou Piniella were blunt but gentle and above and beyond courteous to me. And I did make copies of both of the interviews, and I can see myself handing a cassette to a guy from NBC named Mike Leventhal, who ran a kind of a cartel, almost a black market among New York radio sports reporters. So if somehow you heard Lou Piniella or Roy White talking about Thurman Munson's death on the night it happened to the day after that, that was my interview. I also remembered discovering after 3 or 4 hours of literally working nonstop that I had never really known what that meant. I remember I was supposed to be done at 11 but stayed until 1 a.m., just barely making the last train back to my folks' house. I remember my boss, Sam Rosen, talking to our stringer in San Francisco, his friend Rob Navius, and saying, they're killing my team. We should go to Mexico and smoke ourselves blind. In my youthful misunderstanding of how these things worked, I found myself coming back to the thought that I had somehow failed Thurman Munson. Failed his fans. Failed by not telling somebody about that Yankee fear from April that Rick Cerrone had told me, that Munson was not as good a pilot as he thought he was, although even then I asked myself, who the hell were you going to tell? There are two postscripts to my story of the 20-year-old me covering the night Thurman Munson died. 20 years later, I was hosting baseball's Game of the Week on Fox, and I asked my producer what we were doing for the Munson anniversary, and he asked, what anniversary? He was younger than I was. I had to explain it to him. You want to write something we can pre-produce, like a minute and a half? 90 seconds. Well, the first sportscast I did when it happened was 120 seconds. 90 seconds, sure. I did it. I didn't think much of it. It was there. It told the story. There was a little emotion to it, but it was mostly just the facts. 5 years later, I was one of the public address announcers at Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium, invited there by the public relations director of the Yankees at the time, Rick Cerrone, the same Rick Cerrone who had, in April 1979, told me about Munson and the private planes. The 25th anniversary of Munson's death was days away, and his widow, Diane, was there. We had never met. She saw me on the field and raced up to me and embraced me. That piece you did on him on the Game of the Week, when was it, 5 years ago? 20th anniversary? That was the best memorial I've ever seen to Thurman. Well, she teared up and I teared up and I was stunned. I told her about what that night in 1979 had been like for me. I said I knew it was almost insulting to tell her, but I thought it was important somehow, and she hugged me again. It was deeply moving, and to this day it remains deeply moving. The other postscript I only learned of in 2021. For forever, the reporter covering the New York Rangers hockey team for the newspaper The New York Post has been Larry Brooks. I had forgotten that the year Thurman Munson was killed, 1979, Larry was a very young beat reporter for the Post, covering not New York Rangers hockey, but New York Yankees baseball, and somebody sent me a clipping from the New York Post from Saturday, July 28th, 1979, 5 days before the Munson plane crash, and it is almost beyond belief. Every time I see it, I read it again to make sure that last time I hadn't hallucinated it. Larry's story began, quote, "Reports of Thurman Munson's death are exaggerated, at least slightly," unquote. Of course it was a metaphor. Of course he didn't mean to use that. Munson's knees had been giving him trouble since the previous season, and the manager of the Yankees, Billy Martin, was giving him more time off between catching assignments than usual, and there was a lot of speculation as to whether or not Munson's career as a catcher was over, and then he might have to become a designated hitter or first baseman or something. That's what the story was about. That's what the death reference was to. The death of his catching career. But the Larry Brooks story also included an even more jaw-dropping quote. Asked about the rumors he might not catch again this year, Munson said, "I don't know who started them." It was Martin. Asked after the game how his knees felt, Munson said, quote, "Sore, real sore." Hey, Munson added, "You might be seeing my last hurrah." Larry Brooks told me that story haunted him every day since. And now it haunts me. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Most of our countdown music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, our musical directors of Countdown. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, John Philip Chanel. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Mr. Ray on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. Thank you, Nancy. The Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., is the sports music. Thank you, ESPN. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. Thank you, boys. My announcer today was my friend John Dean. Thank you, John. Everything else was, as always, my fault. So that's countdown for today, day 207 of America Held Hostage Again. Just 1,256 days until the scheduled end of his lame duck and lame-brained term, unless he is removed sooner by MAGA and Jeffrey Epstein or the actuarial tables or Putin at the meeting in Alaska or Russia, wherever it is. I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.
Bully puppet